It started like a whisper at first. A small shift in numbers on a bill Jamal Carter knew by heart. He wasn't just any homeowner. He was meticulous, organized to the bone, and his entire life reflected that precision. Veteran of the Air Force. Jamal had moved into his lakeside ranch 3 years ago after retiring, investing in solar panels and smart energy systems that kept his home efficient and independent. He prided himself on how steady his electricity bill remained, rarely fluctuating. So when one morning he opened his monthly statement and saw it had nearly doubled, he felt something wasn't right. At first he chalked it up to maybe a system glitch. Maybe the power company had miscalculated, or maybe one of his appliances was running inefficiently. He walked through his home, checking every outlet, every system. Nothing seemed out of place. Still, the bill nagged at him, scratching. The back of his mind was suspicion. He called the utility company, but they brushed him off, saying everything checked out. Jamal didn't like mysteries when it came to his own property, so he decided to keep a closer eye on things. That night, while carrying his trash cans down the gravel path to the curb, he noticed something strange. The faint glow of LED headlights peeked out from behind the hedge that separated his property from his neighbor's. He squinted into the dark, and that's when he saw it along. Orange extension cords snaking from his outdoor outlet across the grass, disappearing into the driveway next door. Following it with his eyes, he spotted the culprit, a sleek white Tesla plugged in.
Ow.
Its logo glowing faintly like some smug smirk in the dark. And standing beside it, phone in hand, was Karen, his neighbor and the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. Everyone in the community called her HOA Karen behind her back, though she would never know. She was notorious for her constant nitpicking, filing petty complaints against neighbors about lawn heights, mailbox colors, or even the type of flowers they planted. She strutted through meetings like she owned the neighborhood, always insisting she was acting for the good of the community. And now here she was, caught red-handed, stealing power from Jamal's property to fuel her precious electric car. Jamal's jaw tightened. He walked across the yard and called out, "Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing?" She didn't even look startled. In fact, she smirked. "Relax, Jamal. You've got solar panels pumping out more electricity than you can use. You should be thanking me for helping the environment. It's just a little charge. No big deal." Jamal bent down and yanked the cord out of the outlet. The car's soft hum died instantly. "Don't ever plug into my power again. You want to charge your car? Use your own outlet." Karen rolled her eyes, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. It's just electricity. You probably waste more running your AC. You're being selfish." Jamal's voice dropped lower. "Selfish is stealing from your neighbor because you think you're entitled to it." He dropped the cord at her feet and turned back toward his house. He thought that would be the end of it. But Karen was nothing if not relentless. The very next night, Jamal looked out his window and saw that familiar orange cord snaking across his lawn again. He couldn't believe the audacity. She didn't even try to hide it this time. Her car sat proudly in the driveway, plugged into his power again. Jamal stormed outside, unplugged the cord, and tossed it back into her yard. "You don't listen?" "Well, do you?" said his voice sharp. Karen folded her arms, completely unfazed. "You can't stop me from charging my car, Jamal. It's for a good cause. You should be proud you're contributing to cleaner energy." "Contributing?" Jamal barked a bitter laugh. "This isn't a donation, Karen. It's theft." Her smirk widened. "Go ahead, call the HOA. I am the HOA, and let me save you the trouble. They'll laugh in your face. You want to make this a big deal? Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." And just like that, she sauntered off into her house, leaving her car plugged in as if daring him to do something about it. True to her word, when Jamal brought it up at the next HOA meeting, the board all friends of Karen dismissed him. He chuckled, waved him off, told him to not make a mountain out of a molehill. One even leaned in and whispered, "Look, Jamal, it's just a few kilowatts here and there. Don't let it ruin neighborly harmony." Neighborly harmony. The phrase clanged in Jamal's head. What harmony? Karen had been antagonizing the entire community for years. But because she was wealthy, loud, and had enough influence to bully others, everyone played along. Jamal, however, wasn't built like that. He wasn't the kind of man to let injustice slide, no matter how small. Over the next week, he watched as Karen grew bolder. She didn't even wait for nighttime anymore. Sometimes in broad daylight, she'd drag her cord across his yard and plug in, waving at him like it was perfectly normal. Jamal started noticing the bill climbing even higher, a direct reflection of her arrogance. Each spike was like a slap in the face. One evening, Jamal walked past her car as it sucked power from his outlet yet again. Karen was standing nearby, sipping iced tea, talking loudly on her phone about how green she was living and how proud she was to be setting an example in the community. Jamal stopped, stared at her for a long moment. She met his eyes with that smug grin. "Don't look so grumpy, Jamal," she said once she hung up. "You should be grateful I'm raising property values by being eco-conscious." "Eco-conscious?" Jamal shot back. "You're eco-criminal. You don't care about the planet. You care about bragging rights." Karen waved dismissively. "Details. Details. Don't stress yourself, neighbor. You'll get over it." That night, Jamal sat in his garage, staring at his equipment, his tools, his solar control system. He wasn't a man of impulsive revenge. His military background had drilled discipline into him. But what Karen didn't understand was that Jamal wasn't powerless. He was patient. And when patience ran out, his solutions were always precise, effective, and permanent. He thought about how Karen had laughed at him in that HOA meeting, how she strutted around like the rules didn't apply to her, how she drained his resources while mocking him to his face. Jamal wasn't going to the HOA anymore. He wasn't going to argue or waste his breath. He was going to end this in a way Karen would never forget. That's when the plan began to take shape. He spent days quietly sketching designs, pulling out his knowledge of circuits and fail-safes. His garage became his war room. If Karen wanted to keep plugging into his power, he would give her exactly what she wanted, and far more than she bargained for. And as he tightened the last bolt, adjusted the last wire, and tested the surge rig he'd built, Jamal felt the calm that came before a storm. He wasn't just protecting his electricity. He was teaching a lesson in respect, in boundaries, and in consequences. Karen thought she had the upper hand. But soon she would discover that Jamal wasn't the kind of man you could steal from and laugh at. She was about to find out the hard way. But sometimes when you play games with other people's property, you end up losing more than you ever imagined. Would you like me to now expand part 2 in 1,500 words with the setup of Jamal's trap, Karen's arrogance growing, and the dramatic moment the Tesla battery fries? Jamal had always believed in handling things quietly, with precision and patience. That was what made him so effective in the Air Force, and it was what kept his life calm after retirement. But as he sat in his garage surrounded by wires, fuses, and tools, he knew he wasn't just solving a problem, he was preparing a lesson. Karen had dismissed him, mocked him, and stolen from him without an ounce of shame. The HOA had laughed in his face. If he did nothing, it would only escalate. She would keep plugging in night after night, bold as ever, and he would be forced to watch his electricity bill climb while his neighbor paraded around the neighborhood, bragging about her eco-friendly lifestyle. No, something had to give. He designed the surge rig with precision. It wasn't complicated. Jamal knew enough about solar inverters, circuits, and load limits to create a defensive setup. His outdoor outlet, the very one Karen couldn't resist, would act as the trigger. He rigged a system that would stay dormant when he used the outlet normally. But when someone tried to draw more power than his settings allowed, someone like HOA Karen, greedily charging her Tesla without his consent, the rig would activate. Instead of providing a smooth stream of current, it would deliver a surge. Enough to start a fire, not enough to harm his property, but more than enough to fry sensitive electronics like a Tesla battery system. For 2 days, he worked quietly. The neighbors saw him in his garage and assumed he was tinkering like usual. Karen, of course, didn't suspect a thing. She was too busy bragging. Jamal could hear her across the street during the day, standing in her driveway with a group of friends from the HOA board, gushing about how much money she was saving on electricity. "Oh, my bills are practically non-existent now," she laughed, loudly, her voice carrying across the cul-de-sac. "I just love being ahead of the curve, driving electric, living clean, setting an example for this community." Some people don't get it, but that's because they're selfish. Amal clenched his jaw as he tightened a screw on the surge box. He could see the extension cord coiled by her garage door, ready for its nightly trespass. Selfish. That was her favorite word. She projected it onto everyone else, when in reality, she was the one taking without asking, draining resources that weren't hers. But the beauty of her arrogance was that she didn't see the trap being set. By the third evening, the rig was ready. Jamal tested it multiple times with his own equipment to ensure it wouldn't damage his systems. Each time the surge tripped, cleanly, then reset. He smiled with satisfaction. This wasn't just revenge, it was strategy. Karen wanted power. He would give it to her all at once. That night, he executed the final piece of his plan. He staged his house to look like he was away. He dimmed the lights, parked his truck around the block, and sat quietly in his upstairs office where he could watch the driveway. Sure enough, around 9 o'clock, Karen appeared. She looked both cautious and smug, glancing around before dragging her cord across the property line. Jamal watched her plug into his outlet as if she owned it, her white Tesla humming to life as it began charging. She stood there with her arms crossed, phone in hand, scrolling without a care in the world. To her, this was routine now. She had one, but she didn't notice the faint whir of the surge system waking up. Jamal leaned forward, waiting. Minutes ticked by, the quiet hum of her Tesla filling the air. Then suddenly it happened. A sharp pop cut through the night, followed by a hiss of smoke from the Tesla's charging port. The car's dashboard lit up with warning signals: charging error, battery malfunction, service required. Sparks danced briefly under the hood, and the LED lights flickered like a dying heartbeat. Karen shrieked. Her phone clattered to the pavement as she rushed to the car, her hands flailing. No. What's happening? Her voice cracked in panic as she yanked the cord out of the outlet, but it was too late. The surge had already run its course, frying the delicate systems inside her beloved Tesla. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on. One by one, doors opened as people stepped outside to investigate the commotion. Jamal stepped out too, calm and collected, his arms folded across his chest as he watched Karen's meltdown. "My car!" Karen screamed, clutching her head. "My car is ruined." She spun toward Jamal, her eyes blazing with accusation. "You did this. You sabotaged me." Jamal raised an eyebrow, his voice steady. "Sabotaged? Karen, you've been stealing my electricity for weeks. Everybody here's seen it. That cord is yours, not mine. If your car can't handle what you're pulling from my outlet, that's on you."
Ow.
The crowd of neighbors murmured in agreement. A few even pulled out their phones, recording the scene. One man muttered, "Yeah, we've seen you plug in every night, Karen. Don't act like he's the problem." Karen's face turned scarlet. She glanced around wildly, realizing she was cornered. The cord still lay stretched across Jamal's lawn, incriminating her without question. Smoke continued to curl from the Tesla's charging port, the acrid smell filling the air. "You're all just jealous," Karen shouted, but her voice shook. "I was trying to help the planet. He's selfish. He doesn't care about the environment." Jamal took a step forward, his tone measured but firm. "Helping the planet doesn't mean stealing from your neighbor. Karen, you called me selfish, but the truth is, you've been draining my resources without asking. Laughing in my face and hiding behind your HOA friends. Now your greed caught up with you." For the first time, Karen didn't have a quick comeback. She stood frozen, trembling with a mixture of rage and embarrassment as the neighbors' eyes bore into her. Some shook their heads, others whispered under their breath. The queen bee of the HOA, exposed and humiliated in front of the entire community. Jamal turned and walked back, toward his porch, his footsteps steady. Didn't raise his voice, didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The evidence was right there. For everyone to see: the cord, the fried Tesla, Karen's meltdown. He knew the fallout was just beginning. Back inside, Jamal sat at his desk, looking out the window as Karen paced around her smoking car, yelling into her phone, probably calling Tesla roadside assistance or a tow truck. The neighbors lingered. Outside, some filming, others just shaking their heads in disbelief. Jamal sipped his coffee, calm as ever. The next day, the story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Everyone was talking about Karen's Tesla frying itself after she stole power. Some joked about it at the coffee shop, others at the park. The HOA, usually so quick to shield her, found themselves cornered. Too many people had witnessed the theft for them to deny it. And worst of all, Karen's pride and joy, her expensive Tesla she loved to flaunt, was sitting dead in her driveway, a monument to her arrogance. Jamal, meanwhile, went about his day as usual. He paid his bills, trimmed his lawn, waved at the few neighbors who gave him approving nods. Inside, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't lashed out in anger. He hadn't resorted to shouting matches or pointless arguments. He had simply let Karen's greed run headfirst into consequences she couldn't escape. And for once, Karen had nothing left to say. The night Karen's Tesla fizzled into silence left a mark on the entire neighborhood. For years, she had strutted around as though the HOA were her personal kingdom. People tolerated her because it was easier than fighting, because most didn't want the hassle of her constant complaints. But after what happened, things were different. There was no denying what everyone had seen with their own eyes. Her extension cord trailing across Jamal's lawn, the sparks and smoke. The way she screamed at him while the neighbors stood watching it was burned into memory. Undeniable and humiliating. The very next morning, Karen's driveway told the story better than words. Her gleaming white Tesla, once her pride and joy, sat there lifeless. It was tilted slightly as if ashamed of itself, its once glowing lights now dark. A yellow service sticker plastered across the windshield announced to the world that it was undrivable. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed to gawk. Joggers smirked. A few even took discreet photos, sending them into the neighborhood group chat with captions like "Queen Karen's chariot finally met her match." Inside her house, Karen was fuming. She had been on the phone with Tesla support for hours, demanding emergency service, but the verdict was grim. The battery had suffered severe damage. Replacing it would cost more than half the price of a new car, and it would take months because of back orders. To make matters worse, Tesla support hinted that because the damage was linked to an improper or unsafe power source, the warranty might not cover it. Karen nearly broke her phone in half when she hung up. Her fury quickly turned outward. She stormed the HOA board, her loyal circle of friends who usually bent to her will. In the small conference room of the clubhouse, she slammed her hands on the table and ranted, "Jamal sabotaged me. He set me up, and now my Tesla is ruined. I need to fine him, sanction him, something." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Normally, they would have backed her up, but this time, none could ignore the truth. Every one of them had heard from their spouses, friends, or neighbors about what had happened. Some of them had seen the videos circulating Karen screaming while sparks shot out of her car, the extension cord clearly trailing from Jamal's outlet. One board member cleared his throat. "Karen, look, people saw you plugging in, multiple times. We can't spin this." She whipped her head toward him. "Are you serious? You're going to take his side over mine? After everything I've done for this community?" Another spoke. "Up, quieter. This isn't about sides. It's about facts. You've been using his electricity without permission. That's theft, and now the whole neighborhood knows. We can't just punish him for protecting what's his." The room fell silent. Karen's face flushed crimson. For the first time, her authority over the HOA cracked. She could feel it. She was used to wielding control through intimidation, through her sheer persistence and volume, but this was different. Everyone was staring at her as though she were the problem, not Jamal. She left the meeting in a huff, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Meanwhile, Jamal went about his life as though nothing had happened. He had no interest in gloating, no need to rub salt in the wound. He trimmed his hedges, worked on his truck, and waved politely at the neighbors, who now looked at him with newfound respect. Where once they might have avoided his gaze, wary of being targeted by Karen, now they nodded or smiled, subtle gestures of approval for the man who had finally stood up to her. A few even stopped to chat. "Hey, Jamal," said Mrs. Green from across the street one afternoon as she watered her flowers. "Heard about what happened? Good for you. Someone needed to put her in her place." Jamal chuckled softly. "I just wanted her to stop taking what wasn't hers." Mrs. Green smirked. Well, she got the message loud and clear. Word spread fast beyond the immediate block. By the end of the week, even people on the far side of the neighborhood who rarely interacted with Karen knew the story. Whispered about how she had stolen power and ended up frying her own Tesla. Some told it like a parable, a warning about greed and arrogance. Kids on bikes even started pointing at her house and joking, "Don't plug in there or your bike will blow up." For someone who thrived on control and status, the ridicule was unbearable. Karen avoided going outside except when absolutely necessary, and even then she kept her sunglasses on, her chin lifted in forced defiance. But no matter how high she held her head, she couldn't drown out the whispers. Things worsened when the HOA, under pressure from multiple homeowners, called a special meeting. Neighbors demanded answers not about Jamal, but about Karen. People were tired of her abuse of power, her constant meddling, and now her theft. The board, eager to save face, reluctantly opened the floor. The meeting quickly turned into a reckoning. One after another, residents stood up to air grievances. She'd fined me for having my recycling bin out a day early while she was out here stealing electricity. She threatened to sue me over my mailbox color. But she's been trespassing on Jamal's property for weeks. Every time I walk my dog, she stares like I'm committing a crime. Meanwhile, she's the one breaking laws. Karen sat stiffly in the front row, her jaw tight, as the complaints piled up. The final blow came when a neighbor stood and said, if anyone else had done what Karen did, we'd be facing legal action. The HOA should hold her accountable, like anyone else. Otherwise, this board is a joke. The board couldn't ignore it any longer. By the end of the night, they voted to fine Karen for theft and formally strip her of her informal leadership role. She was livid, but powerless. The very people who once bent to her will now turn their backs on her. As for Jamal, he didn't attend the meeting. He didn't need to. His quiet victory was already secured. When he heard about the outcome, he simply nodded and went back to his work in the garage. Weeks passed and Karen's humiliation only deepened. Her Tesla remained inoperable, waiting for a costly repair. She drove around in a dented rental car, a far cry from the sleek image she once flaunted. She averted her eyes, unwilling to meet the calm gaze of the man she had underestimated. The neighborhood, once suffocated by her control, began to breathe easier. Without Karen's constant surveillance and meddling, people felt freer. Yards blossomed with new flowers. Kids played louder in the streets. Neighbors chatted openly. Without worrying about being reported for some petty violation, it was as if her downfall had lifted a weight off everyone's shoulders. And through it all, Jamal remained the same. Steady, calm, disciplined. He hadn't set out to destroy Karen, only to defend his boundaries. But in doing so, he had exposed her for who she truly was. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the lake and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jamal sat on his porch with a cup of coffee. The neighborhood was calm, filled with the sounds of laughter and dogs barking. He leaned back in his chair, content. Karen had learned the hard way that arrogance and entitlement always come with a price. She had stolen from him, mocked him, and believed she was untouchable. But in the end, it was her own greed that fried her battery and her reputation. Jamal didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. He didn't need to. His victory was written in silence, in the peace that had returned to his home, in the respect of his neighbors, who now saw him in a different light. Let the stuffed his coffee, let the evening breeze wash over him, and allowed himself a small smile. Karen never touched his power again,